So, what major issues have we had to address this year? As I said, several are a consequence of government activity, so let's have a look at some of them. And let's start last April, when, like everybody else in this room, I'm sure, I scoured with enthusiasm the manifestos published by the three major parties. And my attention was grabbed by a line in the Liberal Democrat manifesto which proposed the sequestration of, quote, cash endowment betting accounts to set up a capital fund for improving local sports facilities and supporting sports clubs. Now, for many decades, this would not have mattered because there was no realistic chance of anything in the Liberal Democrat manifesto being implemented. However, the signs were there well before May 2010 that a coalition of some sort, but necessarily involving the Liberal Democrats, was a very real possibility, and so, of course, it turned out. Now, despite the huge number of major issues facing the partners as they worked behind closed doors to hammer out the coalition agreement, this low-level initiative was somehow transposed from the Lib Dem manifesto and made it into the coalition agreement. So the government has had to act on it. The Liberal Democrat MP Don Foster, whose brainchild this is, was therefore tasked by our Minister, John Penrose MP in the DCMS, last July to carry out an investigation and compile a report into abandoned betting accounts and other unclaimed winnings. You'll see the agenda's changed a bit already. And report back to government at the end of last year. And this he duly did, and government is contemplating its next steps. Now, I'm aware that the distinguished Racing Post correspondent David Ashforth had a bee in his bonnet about this issue as well, but in my opinion, it's one of the few things David got wrong. I'm not going to rehearse all the arguments here, but we've made clear to Mr. Foster that we are absolutely opposed to the imposition of yet another hypothecated tax on the high street betting industry. There is no intellectual link between betting and grassroots sports. No reason why the betting industry should be singled out for this treatment when there are many other examples of businesses in the retail sector which retain the value of goods and services which are never used or collected. Prepaid non-refundable rail and air tickets which are not used being two obvious examples of many. Indeed, the main difference with us is that the betting shop punter will get paid out if he or she eventually shows up to collect. Try that with Michael O'Leary or Richard Branson. And what does the government do with unclaimed benefits? Hand the money to the big lottery fund for distribution to grassroots sports? I don't think so. There is, in short, no justification for this. Even the often deployed mantra that the money doesn't belong to the bookie is wrong. Until it is claimed as a winning bet by the punter, it does belong to the bookie, and he pays tax and levy on it accordingly. Whoever it belongs to, it doesn't belong to the government or to the local ping pong club. Now, to be fair, the government has not yet decided how or even whether to proceed on this issue, and ministers are fully aware of their views. Our views, make no mistake about that. Nevertheless, it may still have to go to public consultation, where the minutiae of the implications for tax, industry pricing, etc. will all have to be worked out, and we must insist on an economic impact assessment if this takes place. I venture that the role of ministers, our ministers, is to represent and support the interests of the industry for which they have oversight responsibility, not to respond to narrow sectional prejudice and find new ways of loading yet more cost onto a sector which already pays more in tax than it retains in profit. Let us now turn to the levy. On the plus side, the unusual nature of racing's initial demand for 130 to 150 million pounds was not accepted or was recognised, whilst the target of 75 to 80 million recommended by the board's government-appointed members was accepted. None of the main measures that they recommended for delivering that target were adopted. The threshold mechanism remains in place, albeit much reduced, and the spurious claim to a share of the profits generated by foreign racing was rejected. These are both important points of principle, but the 50th levy is nevertheless expected to raise about another 12 to 13 million pounds extra. Now, about two-thirds of that, £8 million or so, will fall on the three major companies in proportion to the number of shops they each own, while the remaining third falls on the independent sector. Now, as the big companies pay around 75% of the retail levy, the contribution demanded from the independent sector is therefore proportionately greater, with some shops seeing 45%, others more, increase in their levy payments. Now, with single shop operators in particular becoming increasingly scarce, this settlement will lead to more of them closing. This may lead to some consolidation occurring at the lower end of the market, but in some cases it won't, and those shops will be lost. But we are where we are for the moment at least, and only when the likely outturn of the 50th levy scheme, starting at the end of this month, begins to emerge later in the year, and maybe what happens next in respect of the ongoing offshore operator contribution saga, will it be possible to assess what adjustments will need to be made for the 51st scheme. But I suspect that some adjustments will certainly be looked for, depending on, as I say, what happens. Which leads us to the future of the levy. Takes me back 10 years. The Secretary of State indicated early on that he wanted to bring about changes which would take the government out of the dispute resolution process. That's all well and good, even an objective to be applauded. However, it very much depends on what is put in its place, because there is every chance that if he or we get this wrong, we will end up in a worse situation than we're in now. I'm told that a government consultation on the future of the levy is imminent, and we look forward to contributing fully to that discussion. All sides have been calling for a proper commercial relationship, but without, as the Minister observed in his reply to January's parliamentary debate on the levy, moved by Matt Hancock, without saying in any detail what that might entail. Now, I have some ideas, and we'll see what the consultation suggests, but I think it's fair to say that a solution which purports to be commercial, but which relies on some form of artificial statutory underpinning, such as the betting right, trailed by Howard Wright in his Racing Post article this morning, is unlikely to be supported by the betting industry. Because, in effect, the government would be handing racing a monopoly on the right, and a solution where one party holds a monopoly over the other cannot be described as either proper or commercial. No forum of this sort would be complete without a few words on betting exchanges. One thing we and the leaders of racing do agree on is that one way or another, we think that the betting exchanges do not make a contribution to the levy which is commensurate with the volume of business which goes through their market. Whether they should do or not, or how, is a different and difficult issue, and there is no doubt that the arguments are complex, made more complex by Betfair's announcement this morning, no doubt. Were they as simple as some here would have it, the matter would have been solved years ago. Nevertheless, we believe, along with everyone else, except those immediately involved, that there are those who are trading on the exchange market in such volumes and with such frequency that they would, by any sensible definition, be regarded as conducting business, and should thus be liable to contribute accordingly to the levy. There is another real exchange relating issue I want to raise with you, and this one concerns traders betting in running and horse racing. We are all aware that exchange traders at the tracks using high-speed broadband connectivity have anything between 4 and 8 seconds time advantage over punters watching the same event remotely. We also know that they use this advantage to lay bets to the unwary, or even the wary, by offering horses at big prices, safe in the knowledge that the horse cannot win, usually because it has fallen or has already been beaten. Now, in my book, accepting a bet as a bookmaker when the punter has no chance of winning, and you know it, is tantamount to cheating. The Gambling Act is due for review towards the end of this year, and I believe that that opportunity must be taken to look at this issue again.